Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Hannah Elliott.
And I'm Matt Miller. This is Hot Pursuit. Coming up on the show today, we talk about Hannah's deep dive into how some car makers are pivoting away from the newest, highest tech on which they were initially all in.
Yeah, basically, you know what? Just because it's new doesn't mean it's great, right?
Totally agree. This is something actually that I think you mentioned to Ola Kalenius recently. So
yes,
this CEO of Mercedes.
Exactly. This is coming out of multiple conversations, especially in Munich at the IAA show. But it's kind of industry-wide. It's really interesting to note.
All right, that is coming up on today's show, and I think we're probably going to all agree with you because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably somewhat of a purist when it comes to cars.
Probably. And also maybe just a sensible person who likes intuitive logic and common sense. Common sense isn't really necessarily that common, apparently. And we don't need all of these gizmos and doodads and gadgets.
Totally agree.
Right?
Totally agree.
We like a few of them, though.
First off, though, I want to talk about what I think may be the most beautiful new car that I've ever had my hands on.
You're in love.
I am absolutely in love. And to be fair, we get to drive these, high-priced, super luxury vehicles. It's not often that I'm driving the newest Nissan Sentra, right?
No.
But this has been a string of exceptional weeks for me when it comes to getting press cars. I am. And it's not that. So for example, I had the Rolls-Royce Ghost a couple of weeks ago. And obviously, it's a $500,000 car. Almost everything is going to be good about it. And I just wanted to say this because I was thinking about it and someone was asking me why I complain about these things.
Oh.
I do try and highlight the downsides of these vehicles because there are clearly going to be so many upsides to a $500,000 car.
Sure. But as we often stress, price and how good something is for the task, whatever that task is, are not necessarily related.
They're not.
They should be related, but you can't use price as just an indicator.
I'm just saying, though, as a baseline, and I used to say this all the time, but I've stopped saying it because otherwise it would be on every show. I typically get to test drive cars that cost $80,000 or $90,000 or $100,000. They're brand new. They're sent to me by the manufacturer, so they're obviously going to be really good. Plus, they're super modern. Wow. They're going to be efficient. They're going to shift well. They're going to, compared to whatever you had as your first car in high school, they're going to blow your socks off. So what I try and do is pick out the things that aren't so great without having to say everything else is fantastic.
Well, I think we have to talk about how you're defining quote unquote really good, because of course, yes, any car that's new on the market today is going to be better than one from 30 years ago, for sure, in terms of efficiency and engineering. That's just called progress. But I think these cars should be evaluated within their competitive set. How do they stack up against the other cars in that segment and in that price point that a consumer might be considering? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to tell people, hey, if you are seriously considering buying this car, this is what you need to know about it. This is the context, and this is how it stacks up against other of its contemporary cars.
That's a fair point. So the car that I'm talking about is the Aston Martin Vanquish. And
what a beauty.
I am driving the Volante version, the 2026 Aston Martin Vanquish Volante. I guess that means convertible in some language.
In Aston Martin.
Yes. And I will say that I don't know very many people who could afford to buy this car. I mean, it is also...
Surely that's not true, Matt.
All right. I mean, because of where I work,
sure,
I know a lot of very rich people. But in terms of regular dudes who live near me, like the guys I see at school pickup are not going to buy a car that costs, the base price of this vehicle is $483,000. And as it is optioned, the one I'm driving, The suggested retail price is $595,300. So it may be
$500,000
more. It may be, this may be the most expensive car that I have ever driven outside of the Bugatti Chiron that I was lucky enough to drive in Germany.
More than the Rolls Royce. More than
the
any
Rolls
Bentley.
Royce. I haven't. To be fair, I haven't driven all these Ferraris that you drive. I haven't driven a Ferrari since the FF.
This is more than a couple Ferraris as well.
It's going to be more than a lot of those. It is an incredibly expensive. So I'm just saying, like, I can't compare this to many other vehicles that are in the same, stratosphere because there just aren't that many, right?
Okay, granted, this is a gorgeous supermodel of a car.
I think it's the best looking car I've ever driven.
Completely. No one is arguing that at all. But I do think, and I've said this many times before, Aston Martins are overpriced. This is to think that you're paying over $500,000 for an Aston Martin convertible is frankly insane.
I feel like I would do it. I would do it because listen, if you're going to buy a $600,000 car, I have to assume that means you have.
I'd rather get a Ferrari.
You have multiple millions, and I don't know about that. I haven't seen a modern Ferrari that looks this beautiful. The lines actually remind me of the '70s Ferrari Daytona Spider 365, the one that. Don Johnson drives in Miami Vice, although his is just a Corvette dressed up as a Ferrari. But I think it is incredibly, exceptionally beautiful. It is so powerful, 824 horsepower from a 5.2-liter twin-turbo V12. At one point driving to work this morning, I looked down and realized, without knowing it, I was doing consecutive triple
How are you going to put this? Yes.
Yeah.
How specific do we want to get?
And I think in order to buy a $600,000 car, you have to have multiple millions of dollars of liquid assets.
Yes.
So if I had, $10 million in cash, I would definitely buy this car. I can't think of anything else that looks this good that's coming out new. Now, if I were you and I went to all these collector car shows and auctions, maybe I would find an actual 1972 Ferrari Daytona 365 Spider instead. But,
yes.
But that wouldn't be...
What about a 488? I love the 488.
Yes, I agree. It's beautiful.
Such a gorgeous car.
I think I'd probably... Just from reading about it, because I haven't driven either one, but I think I would rather drive buy the 458. Because remember, we were talking to Mark Royce from General Motors, and he said when they were looking to benchmark the Corvette, they got a 488, and they were like, this actually isn't as good as the 458. So they sold that one and got the 458 instead.
I like a 458. I just think the 88 is a little more distinctive. But I will agree with you that it's both beautiful cars.
And we don't have to get off subject, but I've been looking at lately 355s, 360s, and what's the 430 to try and decide which one you'd buy if you're looking at one of those kind of around the $100,000 mark. But let's put that aside for now and just talk about this car because it is absolutely beautiful. The convertible top mechanism works great. It doesn't have many of the things that previously Aston Martin would have, these blemishes or these weird kind of anachronistic features that you thought, like, this doesn't look up to date.
Huge Aston question marks. Like, what are they thinking?
But this does, I think, for the most part, it checks every.
It fixes that
box. You've driven it. What's your take on it?
I extremely beautiful, extremely powerful. To me, it felt very wide. It's a big car. It feels wide. It takes up a lot of space within the driving lane. I thought it drove pretty great. I would have liked to. I mean, it's not a nimble car like you might expect from a 911.
Yeah,
sorry to say that. It's not quite as nimble and elegant. Even as some of the Ferraris, even like a Ferrari Roma, to be honest. I know that sounds crazy. It's just, It's more of a touring car.
It doesn't sound crazy. And actually, so you can change modes
carver
by swinging the dial that surrounds the start button. And I've noticed that, most cars will have normal and then sport and then track or whatever. The normal mode for this car is GT mode.
Right.
So they know it's a GT. And actually, when I walked out to my driveway to get in it for the commute this morning, and it's, the hood is so long.
It's a big car.
I thought, man, this thing is huge. And it, honestly honestly me a little bit to drive these. The Rolls Royce was scary for me to pilot around because it's so big. And if I heard it, I'm afraid, A, I'm going to be liable. And B, Jerry and the guys at Rolls Royce are never going to talk to me again.
Matt, you'd be far from the first or the last press person to.
I don't mind, if I hit a wall with a Camaro, but if I do it with these $600,000 cars, in any case, when I got in it and I drove it and I took it down the Bronx River Parkway, over the Cross County, down the Sprain Brook, to the Sawmill, to the Henry Hudson West Side Highway. So that is a commute that a lot of
New York.
Yes, New Yorkers know and love.
We love
and
it.
Even at 5 a.m, you still get some wheel-to-wheel action, considerable, especially.
You're not rubbing, you're not racing.
And I actually didn't have any problem planting it exactly where I wanted to. I will say the only problem I had, or the only concern I would have with this, is when it's in full auto mode, and of course you can't get it in a stick, which...
That's another topic.
I know. I was talking to Lawrence Stroll about this a couple of months ago, and he was like, "We could do it," and I was like, "Dude,
wow,
you're being
really?
optimistic." He's just was saying that to me, I think.
Can we get a headline out of that?
And he's the billionaire owner, so he's like, "Yeah, we could."
Whatever.
No, but his bean counters are gonna be like, "Dude, we cannot do that." So when you have it in full auto mode and in sport, it downshifts so quickly that it is really scary, and I worry that I won't be able to keep control of the vehicle. So I instantly put it back into manual and drove with the paddles, because when it steps down to like fourth or third, and you're already doing 80 or 90, not that I was doing that speed, all of a sudden you're doing 130, and you're like, whoa, and that would be illegal, and I would never do that on public roads. So. Right. I prefer to keep it in the manual paddle shift mode because you have more control over the acceleration, which is when you touch the pedal hard, it's like a Hellcat. You get wheel slippage right away.
Right. And I don't necessarily think that is a good thing, to be quite honest.
Not if you're worried about scratching it,
Well, right. For a car, it would be nice if it was a little bit more predictable or confidence inspiring for a GT.
My point is that for the most part, I thought it was really confidence inspiring. There were no times when I was worried about rubbing somebody else or scraping a barrier, and I was weaving fairly New York-ishly, The only control issue I had is when I dropped the hammer in auto mode in sport. It just downshifts so quickly that you're all of a sudden you're accelerating so much. And with 824 horsepower, it really is. It felt a lot faster than the Mercedes GT63 SE Performance that I had, which also was 800 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pound of torque.
But probably half as expensive.
Literally, less than half as expensive, right?
Yeah.
It was $250.
That's what I keep coming back to be honest. And I just looked up the numbers on Bloomberg Intelligence, our data side of things. Bloomberg Intelligence says that vehicle prices at Aston Martin are more than 4 times the average price at Mercedes and more than 2.5 times the average price at Porsche. And I know what they're trying to do. They need cash. But I just don't. The Aston Martin to me would be like, if I already have all those other cars, then I will also get that too.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. This has got to be for the woman who already has everything.
Of course, we're talking very hypothetically, but also that's the great thing about cars. We all like to dream and we all like to imagine if we could, this is what we do. It's very aspirational. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah. We're all dreaming here.
I also think this is just going to be such a rare vehicle. You're not going to see, you'll see a lot of Vantages probably. You're not going to see a lot of Vanquishes out there. And
that's very
when
true.
you do, I
recommend
recommend you spend some time to really look at the vehicle. If you can get in it, it's very comfortable, even for someone of my height, which is...
I was going to ask you.
Oh, yeah.
The seating is very low.
It's low, but more than enough leg room, and I'm all leg. You know?
Yes, we've discussed this.
So I think they've nailed it on almost every level. Of course, I would prefer a stick. It's obviously not going to happen. This is more of a GT car, as you point out, anyway, so maybe you don't need that. And I felt the driving experience is... I can't wait to get out of this studio and go drive it right now.
And for the record, I would say that this Vanquish is steps better than previous Aston Martins. The cars are continuing to get better. They're continuing to improve. They're all going in the right direction. I think they understand that.
So as much as I'm in love with this vehicle, and how could you not be, for 600, they better make something amazing. I do think it is the most beautiful new car in existence. There is a flaw, and it's similar to a flaw that I noticed that really kind of irked me on the Rolls-Royce. And we're going to talk about that next, because this gets exactly to the heart of your story on Bloomberg.com right now and on the Bloomberg terminal. That's coming up on the show. I'm Matt Miller, along with Hannah Elliott. There's more Hot Pursuit coming up right after this. Now let's talk about Hannah's latest piece on car makers needing to pivot away from some of their new fancy tech. And tell me about, this is something you kind of talk about to some extent with regards to the Mercedes volume knob. But tell me about how the genesis of this story.
We talk about this type of thing pretty regularly. And it was the volume knobs at Mercedes that really kind of crystallized the idea in my head. Because when I was in Munich at the IAA show last month for the debut of the new GLC, which is Mercedes' top-selling SUV, multiple board members at Mercedes were very open about the fact that, hey, by the way, we are bringing back the real roller switch on the steering wheel that you operate with your thumb that controls the volume that everyone loved in Mercedes, that no one had a problem with. They had gotten away from that with a haptic version. And Mercedes folks were very open, saying, we're going to go back to the roller thing because everyone loved it. And we realized we didn't need it. We just didn't need it. No one was asking for the new haptic style. And I thought that was great. And then when, for instance, Tesla had their big problem with their electronic door handles, obviously we talked to Franz von Holzhausen, the Tesla designer, about that. And Franz told us, hey, we're actually going to reconfigure these electronic door handles that have been criticized as a safety hazard. That really got me thinking, you know what? There is a moment when automakers right now are being a little bit more introspective, and they're saying, actually, we're going to listen to consumers and really read the market here, and we're not just going to throw new things at you just because we can, or the dirty little secret, just because it'll save us money, which is another aspect of some of this new tech that we can talk about. Well,
I can imagine one of the ways that at least those car makers who can afford it, or those selling cars to people who can afford to pay for it, is at one point the whole industry went to everything on the screen. Like even the climate control was in the screen. Or
even the air vents were screens.
Exactly. And what consumers want, even consumers who love new technology, is actual buttons and knobs, especially for the things that you need on a regular basis, right?
Completely. Another example, which I thought was so interesting, is Lincoln, which had put their active park assist in a lot of their vehicles. For a couple years, they spent a bunch of money developing this pretty well-working system that would automatically park your car for you. And Lincoln would look at their consumer data that they capture in the cars, and they realized nobody was using it. Like, nobody was using this active park assist thing because you can park your own car. You don't need it. And so Lincoln just announced that for the 2025 model year, they're taking it out because no one used it and they don't need to put it in. So that's another example of just this idea that you're saying that we don't need necessarily new things that are answering a question that nobody's asking.
That's interesting. I think don't 100% agree with that because so we had that park assist, automatic park assist on our 2020 G-Wagon, and I used it a fair amount because that's also a car I didn't want to scratch in Berlin. Yeah. Oh. And the only problem with it is that it's a little bit finicky to activate. But after I figured it out, I would use it a fair amount. When I was driving this Rolls-Royce Ghost a couple weeks ago, also, I was like, all right, I don't want to risk trying to park this thing myself because it's a boat and I don't want to even nick the paint. But again, it was a little bit too difficult to activate and use. And
you mean that because to activate it, you have to get the car in a very specific position.
Yes,
right?
And you have to go into
very specific
the screen.
Conditions. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I've experienced that too. It's like you have to do everything exactly just so. And I think that's why it doesn't get used. Maybe you're the exception, Matt, but for me, I don't have the patience. I'd rather just take the risk and park it myself.
I don't know how much of it is the fact that I'm always driving test vehicles, so I don't have time to live with and experience them. So in the car that my wife and I bought, and we used it on a regular basis, when I had enough time to figure it out, I did use it more often, especially in tight spots in Berlin. For some reason, they think all cars should be the size of a Fiat Panda. And so it was more necessary. I feel like if I actually owned a Rolls-Royce Ghost, I probably would figure it out to the point where I could use it on a regular basis. And hopefully car makers, because I think that's great functionality. Like
the auto park.
Yeah. I mean, you may be good at parking, and my wife, for example, is amazing at parallel parking.
Depends on how confident I'm feeling that
I
day.
am not very good at it. And I'm also horrified of scratching rims. Yeah. And
that's the worst sound in the world.
It's the worst sound. And for some reason, I mean, this is another sort of, it's not a high tech thing, but I wish car makers would get away from giant wheels, that have no sidewall.
You hated that in the Rolls.
Yeah, and I hate it on all cars. Like, I want sidewall, and I also want the wheels to be protected by the rubber on the tire so that when I do hit a curb, it's not a, $5,000 mistake. So I like park assist, but...
Yeah, I get that. We should say, too, that just trying something out in a new car and then walking back from it is not a new thing. This has happened in the history of cars. And one perfect example of this is, do you remember in the 80s and 90s, those automatic shoulder belts that were attached to the car
when your seatbelt is served to you?
Yes, which I actually thought was the height of sophistication growing up. I thought it was very cool. But those were prone to twisting and sticking, and half of those doors were so big anyway, it was not elegant to engage it. So those went away, especially when, what's the word? Driver airbags. When airbags became standard, that basically did away with the safety harness. Did you ever have a car with a safety harness on it?
Well, by safety harness, you mean the little arm that
automatic.
Would bring you
yes.
the seat belt?
Yes.
Have I ever owned a car that had that? I don't think so, although there have been cars in which I wish that was... keep in mind, I scoot my seat all the way back, and I lean the seat back, so I can usually grab it pretty well, but... No, I can imagine that those would break easily and you'd need to pay money to fix them. So
you know what I would always do too is just you could unclip the shoulder section. So the little modular would run across the top of the door with nothing attached, and I would just always unclick the because I actually had an Acura Legend at one point in college, and I just unclicked it because it was annoying and it didn't really work.
Interesting. Yeah. One modern tech feature that the Ghost had, which I wish more car makers would give you, is instead of reaching out to close the big doors, and I have this problem in my Challenger, and it is actually like a major first world problem with the Aston Martin as well. Rolls-Royce has just a button that you hold in the console, and the door closes automatically for you.
Have you ever closed it on your leg?
No.
I have done that. The other, it doesn't
it have
hurt.
some sort of safety mechanism that makes sure it doesn't,
Yeah, there is a safety thing. You have to keep your finger on the button.
Yes,
right?
true. Yeah.
You can't just push the button once and the door closes no matter what.
Not like
you
a
have
window.
You have to keep your finger on the button. If you take your finger off, the door stops, which is a nice little thing.
Can I tell you the major complaint that I had with the Rolls-Royce Ghost and the major complaint that I have with this Aston Martin Vanquish, and one that I would have in plenty of cars, certainly in 911s, is car makers had developed, especially luxury car makers, high-end car makers, had developed the most beautiful analog gauges. And in a lot of cars, like a Rolls-Royce Ghost, that was a selling point. They have the gorgeous white face, and they have these
like a wristwatch.
Platinum, exactly, arms, and so beautiful. And when I'm operating a motor vehicle, I want to see that kind of thing. Now they've gone to these screens in the dash. The Aston has it.
Well,
the
every
Rolls
Porsche has it now.
All the Porsches have it. And I get that they're configurable somehow if you fiddle with it. And maybe you have your own favorite configuration. But they're just so ghetto compared to a car that you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for. You want the analog gauges. And I imagine this is a way that they're just saving money.
Yes.
It's transparent.
And this is something that has been bothering me because Porsche just announced the interior for the 2026 Cayenne electric SUV. And that interior, I was hoping that maybe they listened to customers and they decided to go back to at least a couple of the dials in the dashboard being analog because, as everybody knows, Porsche has 5 gauges. They went down to a few being computerized, and now they're all computerized. And I thought for a second, maybe Porsche would, go back to some actual analog old world gauges. They did not do that.
Well,
and now, the whole thing is a computer screen.
Yeah.
I was
with Porsche,
disappointed.
the amount of money that they're not making right now, they've had profit warning after profit warning. The stock has been actually crushed. They don't really have the cash to turn. They need to save money where they can. And the development...
well, what about making cars people want?
Right. Well, the development cycle of these cars is also multi-year, right? So even if they decided, like when they had the GTS launch in Sevilla last year, and you said to Oliver Blume, Herr Blume, I really don't appreciate these digital gauges. He probably would have said, well, we need to save money right now, so we're putting these digital gauges on a $200,000 car. But
I only wish he'd been that.
We're developing a new 911, Hannah, and it's going to have actual analog gauges because we know what everyone wants. It's going to have a handbrake instead of an electric button because that's what we know everyone wants.
I know.
And it's going to have an optional stick because although it's expensive, we charge multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars for these 911s. And so we are going to give the customer what the customer chooses.
Because that is long-term thinking about, yes, it's going to cost more money, but in the end, if we sell more cars, then it's worth it.
But if anybody should put actual beautiful
it's Porsche.
Platinum analog... No, I was going to say Rolls-Royce. If Rolls-Royce doesn't do analog gauges... they don't need to cut corners.
But also Porsche, because think of all the racing history that built up the Porsche brand, and racing and real chronological timekeeping pieces are so integral to each other.
Yeah.
It just would make it's a sporting brand. It's motorsports. Every piece of motorsport history has tons of gauges and timekeeping machines.
And a car enthusiast is so much more likely to wear a traditional
mechanical watch.
A mechanical watch.
Completely.
Even though the Apple Watch can do so much for you, right? You'd rather have something that ticks.
Well, the other thing, too, is anytime for this article about the tech, I keep going back to, but if I spoke with the editors from Edmunds and from Kelley Blue Book, and they both said flat out, all of our research indicates consumers are so over screens, period.
Yeah.
And these are independent third parties. This is separate from the automakers trying to tell us what we want or what they think we should have. I don't know how much more clear you can get.
Well, hopefully, if it takes 5 years from start to finish to develop and then sell a car, maybe we're going to start to see more analog gauges.
I would love it.
All right, that does it for this week's show. Remember to follow and subscribe to Hot Pursuit on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen. You can also send us your comments and questions. Email us at hotpursuit@bloomberg.net.
For sure. And check out my columns and stories on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also go there for car reviews, events, and stories that you won't find anywhere else. Find it all at Bloomberg.com/pursuits/autos. I'm Hannah Elliott.
And I'm Matt Miller. We'll be back in your podcast feed again next week.